Let's bring in our panel. Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill. Marie Harf is a former spokeswoman at the State Department. She also worked on the Obama 2012 campaign, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Charles.
This is an epic fail. This is historic. This is 7 years of argument gone down the drain. And I think they're at the end of the road, at least in this phase, on Obamacare. Really, I mean on the replacement. The idea that they're going to get a repeal bill standing alone when repeal and replace was meant to mitigate the effects of repeal is ridiculous. It is not going to pass. They know it's not going to pass. It's a bluff. There are three reasons why this went down. The first is that once you give an entitlement, which is what Obamacare did, you almost never can retrieve it and abandon it. The second is there was no presidential leadership. You want to do something of this scale, you have to do, and here we were critical of Obama, but he gave at least 32 national addresses. You and I lost count. I mean, after that, it was higher than that, on his health care bill, and he made the case. Did anybody make the case for what was in this bill in the Senate other than it was a promise? And the last is that it shows a divide between the moderates and the conservatives in the Republican caucus in both houses is almost unbridgeable, and there's no one to adjudicate the split. The moderates were afraid of the curtailment of Medicaid, and the conservatives are the ones who wanted the curtailment of Medicaid as an entitlement out of control. You put all of those together and you get an epic fail.
So, Marie, Democrats are looking at this and just listening to Chuck Schumer, and they're kind of licking their chops, saying this repeal is not going to work either. But yet you have the issue of Obamacare and how it's working or not working in all of these states.
Right. So I think what needs to happen now, and I think where we're headed, is to bring Democrats and Republicans together, start over, and look at fixes to Obamacare. And I would add something to what Charles said, that the Republicans for 7 years promised that we could do a bunch of things together that probably weren't all going to work, that we could keep everything we liked in the bill, pre-existing conditions, staying on the plan until you're 25, that we could lower premiums, raise coverage, and cut taxes. All of those things together, I haven't seen a plan that does all of those, so they back themselves into a corner here, which is exactly what Charles was referring to. We need to fix Obamacare, and I think you'll get Democrats to come to the table to do that now, after seeing what's happened over the last 6 months.
Matt, here's Senator McConnell, Barrasso, and Paul on the 2015 vote on this same thing, just to repeal.
We just simply do not have 50 senators who can agree. What we do have is a vote that many of us made 2 years ago.
I am ready to make that complete repeal vote again.
If you're not willing to vote the same way you voted in 2015, then you need to go back home and you need to explain to Republicans why you're no longer for repealing Obamacare.
So, Matt, I guess, you know, obviously there was a different vote because they knew President Obama was going to veto it. Now you have the House, you have the Senate, you have the pen, and it doesn't seem like you're going to have the numbers.
There was a great tweet that Phil Kerpen sent out today, which said, gotta love the GOP. They're all for repealing Obamacare as long as Obama's there to veto it. And Charles says this is an epic fail. I think this is an epic lie on some Republicans' behalf. They went around this country for 7 years saying that they wanted to repeal Obamacare. Replace was added in because of the politics of reality, where when you're talking about health care, you're talking about people's lives. And I think it's fair for people to say, I got to know how to plan for my health burden because it comes down to my kids' life, my family's lives. That being said, it was all about what is Obamacare? Obamacare is about taking millions of Americans and jamming them onto Medicaid, onto really a health care insurance option that most people on Medicaid would like to be someplace else, right? And that was the solution. And it was a lot of taxes and it was a lot of mandates. It's me having to pay for a lot of things I'd never want to have in an insurance policy. And that's the big lie. What Republicans want to do is restate and stand up this private individual insurance market. In order to do that, it's going to take years, unfortunately, of the government transitioning back. And this is complicated, but the Republican alternative at the end of the day is for individual Americans who don't work for a big corporation to actually be able to choose the private health insurance carrier that they want.
But here is the problem, is that the process gets in the way. If you don't have the votes, the explaining, it takes a long time. People at home, you know, they listen, but they're really concerned about where their health care is.
I agree, but let me push back on this a little bit. The Senate has been a non-functioning legislative body for too long. I think Marie is right. I actually think that this is not done. I think what has to happen next is they're going to have this vote on repeal, which I'd like to see a vote. I want to see where these people really are when the rubber hits the road.
But you know, there's the three, but plus you have two vulnerable Republicans, Flake and Heller, who could vote no just to say
they're more vulnerable. They're more vulnerable, Brett, if they vote no on repeal than they are if they actually stand by the promises they made for 7 long, grueling years over 4 election cycles. This was the #1 issue that animated politics for the 8 years of the Obama administration, and all of a sudden now they find excuses. It's not acceptable to the voters.
When you have Republican governors who are pressuring a lot of these senators on the fence, John Kasich, Governor Sandoval, who have come out very strongly against this bill. So it's not just Democrats. They're hearing from governors who are on the ground saying Obamacare is not perfect, it needs to be fixed. This is not the way to do it.
But do you really think that Democrats are going to come to the table and say, you know what, let's have this kumbaya moment. You've tried to repeal it all these times, but let's fix it together. Do we really think that that's going to happen?
Of course not. They're going to kick the Republicans while they're down. That's what any self-respecting politician would do. And that's exactly what Chuck Schumer is going to do.
By the way, let me interrupt you. President Trump has invited all of the Republican senators over to the White House for lunch tomorrow to discuss health care and other issues. And I'm assuming that other issues include tax reform, which they are desperate to get to.
Right. I think they'll be talking about the other issues, because if Trump thinks that his magical persuasive powers, which made him a billionaire in real estate, is going to work in changing the vote in the Senate, I think he's mistaken, and we'll discover that tomorrow.
American Conservatives Union statement. Republicans who publicly renounce Obamacare but privately push to keep most of it are unworthy of future support. They symbolize the very frustration that voters have with Washington and the most unproductive Congress in 164 years. Did you write that, Matt?
I had a little bit of a hand in it. I think some of these senators better bring their food tasters with them to the White House, because I have a feeling the president is fit to be tied. I think there's a lot of Republicans and conservatives especially, they just can't understand the legislative process is messy. Yes, you make compromises, but failure to even be able to get the step one, not acceptable.